All right. So very good afternoon to our viewers in Malaysia, and good morning to those who are tuning in the UK. So my name is Calvin, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. So before we begin, I'll just get the housekeeping rules out of the way first. So this session will last for an hour, and it will primarily consist of a presentation by Izwan, our speaker. So after the presentation, where time allows for it, we will then proceed with a short live Q&A session where participants will be given the opportunity to ask Izwan any questions they may have. So your cameras and mics have been disabled, as well as the chat function, but you can still leave your questions on the Q&A function on Zoom. And yep, so today's webinar features a very prominent topic for those who read law and are also interested in tech development. So I present to you Emerging Careers for Law Graduates in the Fintech Space with Izwan Partners. So I'm also pleased to announce that joining me today in today's webinar is Izwan Zakaria himself, the managing partner of Izwan Partners, who will be our speaker for today's webinar. So perhaps before we begin, Izwan, would you like to briefly introduce yourself to our audience and perhaps share a few experiences regarding the type of work that you carry out?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Izwan here. I run a legal practice here in Malaysia. We do primarily corporate law with a special emphasis, not special emphasis, exclusively focused on working with early stage startup and technology companies. So we don't do anything else. So anything that's got to do with real estate, conveyancing, even things like the usual stuff that probably normal firm would do, we would not do it simply because we are very focused about the area that we are specializing. So happy to make the introduction during the presentation, but that's just very quick summary of what I do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Izwan. So, and without further ado, I will then let Izwan take it away with his presentation.
Thank you, Kelvin. Again, thank you everyone for inviting me. I always feel so excited every time I get the opportunity to speak with law students. Not trying to sound nostalgic or anything, but it's always something that I wish when I was studying we had the exposure or the kind of opportunity that we are seeing right now. And obviously, I do hope that the next 40 minutes or so, the time that you are investing with me today, whether it's morning or evening where you are right now, I hope I could add some value in terms of your current personal career development goals that you may have. So again, I know the topic is very sounds quite arduous. I hope I can add value to all of you. Again, I always feel I always feel very little small because I always feel that I still have a lot of things to learn as well. I do hope that I could give you some ideas in terms of what are the things that you should be looking at, because fintech, financial technology, is a very exciting area, and I think it will be potentially rewarding if this is something that you feel that you want to explore further, because this is something that I do on a daily basis. So again, very quickly, my name is Izwan Zakaria. Just call me Izwan. I'm a startup and venture lawyer. I help technology companies and startups do business and raise capitals in Malaysia and also overseas. So we work with a lot of partners outside Malaysia as well, whether it's Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. Most of the time tend to be whether in Indonesia or Singapore. So feel free to connect. Here's the link to the deck, so you don't have to screenshot or anything. You can just get a copy of this deck here on the short link. Happy to have a separate chat if you want to have a call, you want to ask me any specific question, or you want some feedback. Feel free to add me up on LinkedIn or email and so on. So just want to put it out there before we begin. Let's start. I'm not sure whether most of you recognize this. Looks so damn ugly if you really look at it again, but this was my this was my pride and joy 25 years ago. I mean, I come from a small, humble, middle-class family. My mother divorced several months after I was born, so I grew up primarily with my grandparents. So one day my mother decided to buy a personal computer. It was running on Windows 95. It looked something like this. So I think at that time it was, I don't know what year was it. I was standard 1, 7, 8 years old. So I'm sure it must have cost her a lot of money at that particular time when she thought that she wanted to get me a personal computer. I think it must have cost her 4, 5 thousand or something, based on a meager government school teacher salary. So the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because as a young person, I've always been fascinated about technology and computers. So after, as the years goes by, I remember the horror of my mother's face when she saw me disassembling the whole CPU, the whole thing. I took out the whole thing, just wanted to see what the stuff inside, and obviously I managed to put them all back. But the point I'm trying to make here is that all these years, when I became a lawyer, I've been practicing as a corporate lawyer. I always felt that I really want to move back into this passion that I had in technology, and which is why uh, 2 years ago I set up my own law firm, so to do exactly just that. So I made a conscious and deliberate decision. Let's just focus on a very specific area, and I may not be a particularly good example of what makes a good employee. To be honest, I'm actually a lousy employee, which is why I'm very embarrassed to actually share with my resume. I think for a lot of various reasons, that was also why I decided to set up a law firm, because I think based on the resume that I had, I was staying in a company for a while and I would jump somewhere here and there. Not really advisable thing to do, simply because I was yearning to find something that I would really like to do. I think after many years, I can finally say I actually found something that I actually enjoy doing. So I'm still, I would really like to think I'm still a young lawyer. So I've been only in the practice for the past 10 years or so. Still not even, I can actually hire people now, but still a young lawyer in the sense that there's still a long way to go, and that's something that makes this profession a profession, because it's a marathon and it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint. So a lot of young, I mean, something that I myself, I'm not trying to sound sentimental, but as a young person, I was very ambitious. I wanted to become a partner and all those other things. So ultimately, you get burnt out and so all these things. So anyway, without going to the nitty-gritty of things, happy to have that discussion as well. We have a bit more time later, but I've always been a corporate lawyer. The only time I went to the court was when I got called to the bar and got my practicing certificate. So hopefully none of the contract I've drafted will get a subpoena by the court because of something that I drafted or something like that, hopefully. So on my free time, I mentor startup and early stage entrepreneur, which is why I'm so excited to be here today speaking with all of you. Something that I wish I would have had the opportunity to speak with someone older to tell me, okay, Izwan, instead of trying to be a rolling stone, why do you really choose a good law firm and stay there instead of try to do something new and it may not work out, kind of thing. Obviously, there are trade-off. I mean, in economic term, we call it opportunity cost, right? There are certain pros and cons of certain decision that we make. But something that I try to do now is I pledge at least 20-30% of my time every month on mentoring, whether if it's not a startup or entrepreneur. I try to commit time to help other fellow law students that may need some help, or sometimes they just need some introduction with somebody or something. If that's something that I could help, I'll be happy to do so. So these are some of the clients that we work with for the past 2 years or so. We work with a lot of people. We work with accelerators, venture capitals. Some of them you can see they are government agencies like Cradle Fund, which is a funding agency. We work with e-commerce platform like MIA and so on. They are publishing, for example. We work with co-working spaces. We work quite a bit with fintech companies, primarily on helping fintech startups that have gotten license overseas. they want to come to Southeast Asia and looking at Malaysia as a potential jurisdiction to springboard their expansion. So we help some of the clients that we work with on the fintech side include Wahid Invest, which is one of the licensed digital investment management or robo advisor. So they were number 3 after Stashaway and MyTO. Another 2 now. There are a lot more digital robo advisors like Akruna as well. So we also help Akruna quite a bit in their licensing work. So we work with a lot of fintech platforms like crowdfunding, P2P, peer-to-peer lending, for example. And so obviously over the years, we've got some good relationship with the regulators. So that sort of like give us the unique perspective in terms of navigating the challenges, not so much on the application perspective, just filling up the form, but also understanding what are the potential things that the regulator may want to know in terms of trying to figure out the business model and structure. So when it comes to the fintech space, obviously there are a lot of different business models and structures out there, and obviously you may have come across some of them, or you may even be using some of them right now. Looking at payments, for example, like e-money, using BigPay to make payments, GrabPay, all this nowadays. The last several months, we've been very bombarded with all this promotional materials from buy now, pay later operator. You know, when you want to buy something from the e-commerce platform, there's a pop-up that says, okay, instead of paying 100 ringgit for this dress, you want to pay in 4 months or 3 months installment instead. And there have been a lot of issues right now surrounding the buy now, pay later. You can see these guys like Hula, Splits, Atome, for example, and some jurisdiction like in Singapore and the UK are also looking at coming with some form of regulation, because a lot of people are getting excited and they end up buying stuff which they can't really afford simply because of the 0% enticement that they get together with all the cash reward and discounts and so on. So obviously I'm just giving an example here. There's so many other different fintech businesses out there. You've got regulatory tech as well in terms of similar to cybersecurity here. There are a lot. Something that we also need to acknowledge is the fact that all the technologies that are helping us, making our life more easier and seamless, it also means that it makes it much more easier for criminals to do their unlawful stuff. You know, like all these issues surrounding money laundering, being abused because of cryptocurrency, the whole anonymity that comes attached with the ability for blockchain to be used to transmit digital currencies, for example. So obviously you guys know this already, but the point I'm trying to make is that the question mark is whether or not we have the laws in place to govern all these businesses and protect the consumer. And this is something that we all need to be aware that in any country that we go, whether it's Singapore, the UK, Malaysia, there are different laws that will come to play, and laws are inherently obviously territorial. Different country would have a different set of regulator, and that makes it limiting, but at the same time exciting as well, because it means that in every country that you need to go through, there are always different laws that may be involved, and it means that there are opportunities for the local councils there to eventually offer their advice to manage and navigate that particular legal challenge, for example. So very important for me to manage your expectation. There are quite a number of people that join, so I know you may have different questions or different things that you wanted to ask. So let me put some caveat here, because I think it's also quite important. Wanted to share with you the goals. First is to really to give you some flavor in terms of what fintech law is like as a legal practice, and what kind of interesting things that you get to get exposed on a daily basis, and what are the opportunities in the fintech space for law graduates, something which I personally think will be of interest for you to consider. And obviously, when it comes with opportunities, there are also challenges that comes attached to it. And obviously, these are non-exhaustive. But again, happy to have a separate chat if there's something else that you want to speak about during a Q&A or separate discussion. So this is just something I plucked out this morning before the presentation today. I got it from this website, Chambers Associate. You can just click on the link once you download the deck to read the actual interview. So it's an interview with several UK fintech lawyers. And these are some interesting excerpts of their remarks and their experience of becoming a fintech lawyer. So every day for me, obviously, I'm a startup lawyer. I speak to 5 different entrepreneurs every week. So when you pick up the phone, I would get a 21-year-old graduate guy who's not happy with his current GLC MNC graduate program. He wants to leave and start a fintech startup, or in the evening when you pick up the phone, you could get a 45-year-old investment banker that wants to do a crypto exchange. So you get to learn new things every day, and that makes it very exciting. But I think one that I feel so close to me is the first person here that said that when you spoke to people in the fintech space or crypto space, or whatever space that you may come across, you hear about the solution or the product or the service that they're trying to create. I always felt that I really want to be involved in this journey, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to come up with something new. They're not trying to come up with another Nebeng to you or another service that is already out there. They're trying to come up with new innovative solution that would help people out there. That makes it very exciting for me, and I've always been very excited to speak to new entrepreneur, because it's always something, it's like going through a journey, and that makes it very exciting as a practitioner as well. And that's something that personally I did not feel like when I was working with a larger law firm. Doing corporate deals are fun. I mean, obviously you're looking for large listed company doing private placement, initial public offering for large high net worth tycoons and all this thing. But obviously you're already helping grow an empire or a conglomerate. But in my scenario now, from where I'm standing, it's more exciting in the sense that you can actually see something from zero, something growing, and you get to be part of that journey. I think that personally, for me, has been spiritually and also financially rewarding as well. Why? I mean, who should be a fintech lawyer? Again, I'm not trying to be a life coach or trying to tell you what to do. Or obviously, these are purely anecdotal from my own personal experience or my own generalization. So I do apologize if I may offend certain people here that may have a certain perspective of other lawyers, but I can't speak for the rest. And as well, I mean, maybe you're looking at maritime shipping lawyer, shipping law. Again, you need to speak to them and ask them what it's like for them. But for me, working a lot with fintech entrepreneur and companies, I feel that if you want to be a good fintech lawyer, again, I don't want to go I don't want to go down the path of becoming a life coach or anything, but not trying to say that there's a prescription that you need to follow, but it's going to be very exciting if you are future focused. You're always looking at the future. You always get excited. You subscribe to Engadget or all this latest stuff that is coming out from Apple or all the other technology companies. If you're always looking forward to new gadgets, stuff, or you're following all this current news that's happening around cryptocurrency, blockchain, AI, I think fintech lawyer is something that is worthwhile considering, because every time you speak to a client, you always know that you're talking about something that is a very forward-thinking kind of a future tense kind of thing, which is very different when you decide to become a. Again, I need to be very careful here because I don't want to offend certain of my other lawyer friends as well. Because if you are a litigation lawyer, for example, you're dealing with dispute resolution. You're always dealing with, most of the time, always dealing with something that's already happened. So when a client comes to you, they know that the contract has been broken or there's a breach of contract or something has happened, and you're not trying to resolve how do you manage this and go to the court and present the best argument. But when you become a corporate lawyer or fintech lawyer, you're actually sitting down and trying to think what is the best way to structure this business in a way that will be effective and correct or practical, that will be able to help the business achieve its commercial goal, for example. That for me, I think has been very exciting. You're dealing with, um, and I think the second thing that I want to share is that you must love, you must enjoy dealing with difficult and complex stuff. And I know it took me some time to be able to explain to blockchain to people, and sometimes I still struggle to do so. You know what? Reportedly, I've not validated this whether or not Albert Einstein actually said this, but Albert Einstein said something that if you can't explain a concept to a 12-year-old, you don't know it that well. So I think that would be a good general rule. But if you like dealing with difficult and complex stuff, fintech, technology, law, always something that worthwhile considering. Not saying that aviation, shipping, or competition law are not difficult, but this is one of the areas that I think if you're really looking at future-proof career, I think this is worthwhile consideration. And I was lucky because I had a mentor many years ago and who told me that like if you have to choose between something that is easy or difficult, always choose the difficult thing to do, because if it's easy, a lot of people want to do it. You know, that the path of least resistance, right? Most people by default want to do the easy stuff, but if you end up doing difficult legal transaction, then not only you'll be able to do the easy one, but you will also mean that you'll be able to stand to have a premium value to the work that you do, because not many people will be able to accomplish it, for example. Again, number three, you need to enjoy working in an uncertain and shifting regulatory environment. Sounds quite onerous, but what it means is that a lot of the times you're dealing with something new, and there may not be an existing law that will be able to govern or capture exactly what's happening. You guys know what was happening in Malaysia several years ago in terms of cryptocurrency, for example. There's so many cryptocurrency exchanges that were mushrooming, and there was a certain confusion at a particular time whether or not cryptocurrency should fall under the purview of the central bank, whether it should be under the Securities Commission. But ultimately, it was finally resolved that there was an order that came out to say that cryptocurrency is a form of security and therefore falls within the purview of the Securities Commission. But during that particular time, there were a lot of confusion, and it makes it interesting in the sense that as a legal practitioner, you were able to come in and provide value in terms of really helping to shape the law. And if you're involved in the discussion with the regulator as well, you are also able to give your feedback and inputs in terms of how the law should be formulated. The last, actually, also minor point, also very, again, they're not exclusive only to fintech, obviously, but if you're passionate about innovation and new ventures, most of the time the entrepreneurs I meet, obviously the clear cut will be the social entrepreneurs trying to help deal with environmental issues, dealing with financial inclusion. There's so many still Malaysian that may not have access to bank account. Simple thing like having a bank account, for example. These guys I know are unbanked, but there are more people who are underserved. So underserved in the sense that although they may have a bank account, but they may not have credit, or they may not have credit card, which may not be necessarily a good thing, but it also means that they may have been deprived of certain opportunity to purchase certain, because of not be able to get good credit, for example, or even enjoy other things like borrowing and so on, something that a bank would offer to a lot of people. So for example, many of us would have a bank account, but we can also transact online and so on. That's why digital bank license that's going to be issued by the central bank is very interesting, because the bank is very clear in the guidelines. If you guys read the digital banking framework, it says very clearly that the business model needs to focus on financial inclusion. So if it's just going to be another bank to you or another CIB clicks, most likely it's not going to get approved. So that's going to be something very exciting. The last but not least, also very important, is that if you love working with smart and talented people, fintech will be one of the places to go. And not sure I'm going to say it's like the new investment bank, but it's really so inspiring to meet so many young people, and they're so smart in terms of understanding the subject matter and appreciation of what value proposition that they can offer in terms of the business or the product that they're trying to offer to the market. And I think I derive a lot of joy speaking to these people, and obviously I think it was Bill Gates or something who said that if you are in the smartest room, you are in the wrong room or something. So I thought that would be something interesting to take note. Again, I wouldn't go to the details here. Happy to get sharing the link to the deck. You can get a copy of it. But obviously, there are a lot of challenges involved in terms of dealing with fintech application here, because obviously on the regulatory side, we are still relying a lot on the existing laws that were passed. Some of them were passed even pre-independence or after independence that have not actually been updated. A good example will be like the Money Lending Act, for example. The law was passed sometime after independence, it was 1960s, and we're still using that now. So obviously, the old Money Lender Act says that if you want to run a money lending business, your license is only limited to a particular district or locality, for example. But with the internet, doesn't make sense for the money lending business to only limit it to a particular area. You want to be able to offer it to anyone that wants to borrow money, for example. And this is the thing that the regulator has done. And to give you a perspective, even for money lending license, the regulator that is in charge is not central bank or even the SC, is actually the Ministry of Urban Housing, and you need to go to the Ministry of Urban Housing to get a money lending license. So what they've done essentially is to come up with a new guidelines that helps with the application. So that could be one example to share with you that we're still relying on a lot of archaic law that may not be relevant to cater to the new fintech business models that you can see earlier. Number two, obviously, talent shortages. I mean, smart people are everywhere around the world. They're not just limited in one place. But ultimately, if you decide to focus on fintech technology, for example, it makes you a very interesting person because not many people are familiar with this area in terms of having that in-depth understanding. And if you have passion for this, I really think you should consider it as one of the things that you may want to explore further. And the last, obviously, legal clarity, something quite similar. We have existing established laws that governs construction, housing development, property development, and all the other usual things that you may know. Buying and selling houses, they're quite straightforward. Nothing fancy there, but if you're dealing with intangible assets, blockchain, now we are talking about non-fungible token, NFT, or Copyright Act, obviously is not up to date to cover dealing with ownership of NFT, for example, the whole copyright aspect of it, and so on. So these are very exciting times. At the same time, obviously notwithstanding the political challenges that we have, still businesses are thriving in the sense that it opens opportunity for fintech players to offer new solutions to help, especially the underserved market. So again, a bit too long here. I don't want to spend too much time. I just wanted to put it there just so that you can read it during your leisure time. But different areas of how you can play a role in the fintech space, especially if you are legally trained, whether or not you are legal counsel or engaged by the fintech company or you yourself working in the fintech company as well. A quick illustration, generally speaking, when you're dealing with fintech, you need to come up with the structure, and the structure needs to be legally correct in the sense that it follows the current law and it is bound by the documents that you use are correct and it can be enforceable, and that's an important part. So we work a lot with crowdfunding platforms, so I just wanted to quickly extract an example of what a typical crowdfunding platform looks like. So we won't go to the detail here in terms of the process flow, but what I'm trying to make is that you get to work with a lot of different service providers and parties. Like for example, even a simple crowdfunding platform, as you can see here, whether it's equity crowdfunding or whether it's peer-to-peer lending, which are obviously regulated here in Malaysia by the Securities Commission. You get to work with different service providers. You get to work with the custodian, the escrow agent here, the companies that are looking for funding. So we help a lot of startup to raise funds using crowdfunding campaigns, because in Malaysia, you don't have a lot of investors investing in the seed round. So crowdfunding platforms seems to fill that gap now. by offering the opportunity for people like you and me on the streets to raise funds. So that's also another interesting area of law as well when it comes to fundraising, for example. Um, not sure whether you guys read this many years ago. I think we still have this issue. I mean, our Personal Data Protection Act, obviously our personal data laws were inherited from the European Union. To date, we still have not updated it. Obviously, it will take a while before we have a parliament sitting to actually discuss about this, among other things that has not been sorted out. But obviously, not with be that as it may, we need to work around the existing laws that we have, and this in itself, I know some of my colleagues that I've met for specializes specifically just dealing with privacy, for example, dealing with data issues, very niche areas in more mature jurisdiction like in the UK, in Europe, for example, would be an interesting area to focus on, not on the superficial level, but more on the granular level. It becomes more increasingly important, particularly with all the issues surrounding technology companies and how technology companies use personal data. I mean, you know the saying, right? I mean, if you're not buying for anything, if you're not buying from the company, you are the product, which is how Facebook and all the other large companies are using our personal data to offer ads and so on. And what there's some good companies like Apple, obviously, that comes up with all this do not track, for example, that allows you to opt out from some of the apps from showing you all this customized ad. But still, the laws that we have needs to be updated, and hopefully we will see some significant changes soon. Again, I know I mentioned earlier that may have a certain reservation about dispute resolution, but don't forget that litigation obviously plays an important role if all else fails. We always make this joke among the corporate lawyers that our litigation lawyers friends are our last line of defense. So somebody messed up a contract, hopefully the lawyer will have to help us interpret what exactly the intention of the parties when they were signing it. So obviously fintech, a lot of issues primarily because of the nature of the fintech business itself. Obviously we all know that um, fintech is supposed to be not limited to a particular jurisdiction, and at the same time laws are territorial, meaning that if you go to Singapore, you have different Singapore law that applies when it comes to e-money, for example. But um, I don't know a lot in litigation lawyer that are actually looking into this, because obviously from a dispute resolution perspective, there'll be bound to be disputes, especially in Malaysia. We have cases already that decided that cryptocurrency is a form of digital asset that is recognized under sales of goods. So that's encouraging. At the same time, our lawyers, our judges, for example, are obviously generalists. Our arbitrators more focus on the usual engineering, oil and gas, construction stuff. We still need a lot more lawyers to be well versed on all this technical aspect of technology, things like dealing with cryptocurrency, digital asset, if it's a soft wallet, hard wallet, dealing with NFT assets. And these are the things that will be very important in the future when it comes to being able to litigate for the client that you are representing, is to have that in-depth understanding, and that's important. Again, this may not be directly related to fintech, but these are some of the emerging issues that's been going on the last several years, and becoming more apparent now with the pandemic that is going against the backdrop of all this political fiasco that we're going through. We still have a lot of issues surrounding, obviously, financial inclusion. Because of the pandemic, it's just merely showing the structural weaknesses that we have. A lot of people don't have access to food and so on, but obviously we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs stepping up, like Kita Jaga Kita, Sambal Sauce, for example, coming out with all these peer-to-peer platforms trying to help. And obviously fintech is also trying to help in terms of helping the society. But these are some of the interesting topics I'm sure you may have come across: data privacy, decentralized finance, digital economy. Obviously, people are resorting to selling stuff online, e-commerce platform, for example. There's some competition law issue as well, like large e-commerce platform like Shopee, Lazada, Are they telling their merchants or sellers to only use their preferred courier service? We do not know. Potentially, there could be some vertical restraint case going on there. But again, I'm just speculating here. You need to go through the contract and all. But these are the things that, from a regulator standpoint, I'm sure they're looking into all these things. Again, cybersecurity, more people are on the internet. Obviously, Zoom, the one that we are using right now to have this conversation, had a lot of issues, people with Zoom bombing and so on. I think it's sort of pretty much resolved now, but still, more people will be working from home, although physical office will not go away, but dealing with cloud, dealing with payments being made, not going through, and also cryptocurrency that we're dealing with. So again, a lot of stuff going on, obviously, and we need more people to look into this, and we need more discussions to happen, not just on the international level, only in the US or in the UK. We need something that is more focused on the ground. Like, for example, issues surrounding the gig workers that we have, not so much related to fintech per se, but obviously looking at the welfare of these people. Obviously, some platforms, for example, like Gojek, they are complementing it with InsurTech product, like allowing them to have personal accident insurance. So that has been quite encouraging. And some of the innovative product that they've come up with this income replacement insurance, where suddenly it rains the next day or the day before, they get insurance from the insurer to cover that day where they may lose their income because they can't go out because it's too risky or too dangerous to be on the road because it's raining. So these are exciting stuff that are being developed, very niche, very bespoke towards the use case. And these are makes it very exciting for you to also explore. If you would want to be a lawyer, you become an entrepreneur, for example, just putting that thought out there for you to consider. Um, Again, I know you guys are here for this, so let's jump right into it. And these are just my personal observation. Again, unfortunately, life doesn't work in a doesn't work in a straight line path kind of thing. We may have to go through different choices and stumbling block along the way, but these are some of the ideas that I think would be worthwhile considering. I know I'm saying this as a general remark. I mean, it's a very challenging time out there. I understand. I mean, maybe many of you, when you go out, if you're a second year, first year, I think you should have a bit more time. But guys who are living, I'm helping the final year law students from the law school that I used to be in. They're living in a they're graduating in a soft job market. A lot of law firms that used to hire pupils are not hiring it, and obviously they'll have an uphill challenge to get a role. And what do you do then? Obviously, you should spend this time to really figure out things and keep on learning, don't stop reading, and so on. So how do you get into fintech? Before I start rambling more, but on other things that may not be relevant. I don't know if you guys came across this news the last few days. Binance, obviously, very well-known cryptocurrency exchange. So an exchange is essentially a digital platform that allows you to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. So just like how if you have a trading account to buy and sell shares in the stock market, you go to Bursa Malaysia and you use one of the trading platforms like Rakuten or Maybank to you, or so many different FSM1 and all these different platforms out there. So Binance is the cryptocurrency exchange. So the Securities Commission, the regulator in Malaysia, just gave them a cease and desist, which is to tell them to stop operating, and essentially telling everybody, if you have a account with this company, go and take out all your cash, take out all your digital currency and put it somewhere else. So it causes a huge scrambling around by all the customers. And obviously, I think they've actually complied. And this is just in Malaysia, but what's interesting about the Binance fiasco is that it's not just happening in Malaysia. The same thing happened in Thailand, and the same thing happened in Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong regulator, which is the equivalent of the Securities Commission in Malaysia, the Securities and Futures Commission, just gave a warning and say you need to stop doing what you're doing because you're not authorized or you're not licensed to do this. And why I'm sharing this with you is because if your question is how do I get into fintech, one potential way, I don't know whether it's a conventional or unconventional, but one way is actually to join the regulator, and everywhere in the world, whether it's Singapore, whether in the UK, there are different laws involved that governs fintech companies. So in Malaysia, obviously, you have two main regulatory bodies. Obviously, there are other entities like Labuan Financial Services, for example, but primarily these are the two important ones. Bank Negara or central bank regulates payments, anything that's got to do with money will be under their side. So all these guys like e-money, merchant acquiring, for example, payment services, digital bank obviously falls under the central bank purview. So they come up with this thing called FTech, which is the Financial Technology Enabler Group. So where they came up with this thing called Sandbox, which allows for fintech companies to go and be in this thing called a regulated environment where they can figure out things at the same time, be in this insulated control environment, for example. BNM is full of smart people. They've got some really super smart people from all the Ivy Leagues universities. Very exciting place to consider an opportunity there. And obviously, this commission is another one. They have their own innovation and digital strategy team. It's a very dedicated department just looking at all these fintech companies. So Malaysia, interestingly, is one of the first country in Southeast Asia that came up with a guideline to regulate crowdfunding companies. First was the guideline to regulate equity crowdfunding in 2015, and then later in 2016, another extension to the guideline to cover peer-to-peer financing. So we are pretty good in terms of regulatory awareness and regulators trying to facilitate new innovation when it comes to financial technologies. So we work a lot with both of these guys, more with the Securities Commission. Very interesting place to consider an opportunity there. It's very clear. What is it clear? I mean, very structured career progression. You get to speak to so many different applicants. You get to really sit down and really learn stuff because you're really going into deep into the existing regulatory framework. You get to see how different laws in other countries work. If you are in the financial, if you're doing the research work in terms of coming up with the guidelines, you need to come up with a policy consultation paper, get feedback from other participants and stakeholders, for example. So that's one way to get into fintech. The second one, obviously, the most obvious one is obviously to join a law firm that focuses on fintech. But unfortunately, in Malaysia, as I can see right now, we don't really have a dedicated law firm like some firms in other countries, the UK, in the US, that focuses only on fintech or technology, for example. We have a lot of these guys in large law firms. So it's a large law firm, but they have a partner that focuses in fintech, but may not be just fintech. The same guy, the same lady, may also be doing other complementary or something that is core, like the other things that usually comes up together is obviously in the UK we call it TMT, the technology, media, and telecommunication. So fintech is this new branding that just came about. So really go and study them, and these are some of the names that I managed to come up with. I'm sure there are a lot more out there, but these are the guys that really doing a big work on this. Jonathan Lim, for example, and Wong Su Wan from Izwan Partners. Jonathan is from Zico. They are both also members of the Fintech Association of Malaysia, an association which also I'm a member. But these guys, obviously, one of them is a secretary, and one is a committee member. Obviously, they are a larger law firm out there, and you can go and see whether they're hiring. Obviously, you join a large law firm, it's a bit of a hit or miss, but again, that's just my personal sentiment. But you can't go wrong if you join a large law firm because you get to deal with all the large transactions, you get the pedigree in terms of branding and so on. So that's something for you to consider. You can check on obviously the usual legal reviews, the ranking, legal 500 and so on. And there are some other second tier, not second tier in the sense that they are not they are first grade, second grade, anything in terms of the nature of the law firm. They are not large in terms of more than 50 lawyers. There are only like 10 to 20 lawyers. For example, you got guys like Donovan and Ho, GLT Law. I would fall within this second group, for example. So obviously you get to work with cutting edge and challenging projects, but obviously there are downsides as well to consider, just like how it is when you join a regulator. Very hard to get a placement. Most of the time, this partner run a very small niche team that they may have brought in from their previous law firm before they join the law firm. I mean, obviously nowadays, partners move from one law firm to another law firm all the time, and that's why they want to keep a small team, and which also means that it may be difficult to focus on fintech per se during your initial years, because obviously as a young lawyer you may not get the opportunity to do exactly what you want, because most of the time you're just assisting and helping. And my personal suggestion is that may not be necessarily a bad thing. I mean, with the first 3 to 5 years of your career, it should be all about really thinking yourself like a sponge, like just absorbing as much as you can, so long as you're within the realm of company law, corporate law, capital market law. You get to learn all this thing, and obviously you can always transition into fintech at some point, and really enjoy the journey. And obviously it's very hard for me to appreciate this many years ago, but it's really exciting time if you're just starting out, because you really have a lot of headache, as much as headache that I'm going through at the moment, for example, and what the partners are doing, for example, in terms of trying to ensure that they got enough work, making sure that they reach the target at the same time. Not saying that if you're first year or pupil, you don't need to reach any target, just that the challenges that these guys have to face are probably twofold and threefold, without neglecting your predicament. But these guys have a lot more expectation in terms of what is expected of them. Again, third option is you can join a fintech company. And this, I shamelessly took it from Vincent. Vincent is a wonderful friend. He runs this online news publication called Fintech Malaysia. So please subscribe it already if you have not. He covers Singapore, Malaysia, pretty much Southeast Asia. You would have coverage. So I've been looking at it several hours ago. I was quite impressed. Actually, in Malaysia, we do have quite a bit of fintech companies operating, and obviously not many of them would end up in the news or the Edge or the Star business section or anything. But there are quite a number of interesting fintech companies that you can see. Some of them are in the payment business, some of them in the lending side, some of them are, you can see the peer-to-peer lending guys, some of them are in the buy now, pay later, marketplaces, insurance as well. Obviously blockchain, you can see CoinGecko over there doing so well now, run by, I can't remember the gentleman's name. Two Malaysian guys that are doing now, becoming one of the most well-visited website when it comes to looking at cryptocurrency prices and all the other analysis that they're doing. Obviously, we've got WealthTech. A lot of people are into personal finance nowadays, becoming more, as when more people are becoming more financial literate, wanting to take charge of their personal finance. Some robo advisors you can see, obviously KYC. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you are interested, obviously any fintech company that you can see here would appreciate having someone that is legally trained. You'll be surprised to see how many of the platforms operating without any legal advisor, because sometimes they want to save money, but they do really see the value. So if you're joining in with an angle where not just you're coming in to do the legal stuff, but also you want to be involved in the operation, and obviously there's some additional added value there as well. Something for you to consider. What else? Last one, obviously, I know a bit ambitious to come up with this suggestion, but you can always start out your own business. And I think as someone that works a lot with entrepreneurs, really what is there to lose? Obviously, I'm not your parents, so I cannot decide what you should do with your life. But as a lawyer, as someone that is someone that has spent 4 years in law school, it really gives you an upper advantage. Obviously, your legal background means you have a head start on navigating the fintech regulations involved. I mean, as a law student, we're so used of identifying issues, identifying red flags. Obviously, it makes you a more well-rounded person in the sense that obviously you may lack in terms of the actual entrepreneurship experience, which is where you want to figure things out. But your legal background could really be a plus point because we're so used of learning what we don't understand. And obviously, that's the first thing you're going to do if you want to start a business is go and figure things out. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, I assume that as a law student, we all will learn how to negotiate with people dealing with co-founders, potential investors, or even customers. So these are some of the suggestions in terms of legal career options for you to consider. Obviously, the last one is not very legal related, but still something to consider. Again, some quick advice before I end. I know there's some questions in the Q&A. I'm happy to take a look at it shortly. Again, there is no end all be all firm out there. What I'm trying to make is that life doesn't work in a straight line trajectory. Right? I mean, there's some right now a lot of final year law students who have to grapple with the pandemic in the soft job market, and some of them may have challenges trying to get a placement for their pupillage and so on. So it may take a while before they can actually get an opportunity. But what do you do then? I mean, you can go and sit down and watch Netflix or some other streaming thing, or you can either pick up a skill, learn coding. I mean, although some of you may not be so fortunate, you need to get a job or something, but still does not mean that the knowledge acquisition stops there. And always opportunity to learn something new. And go and watch the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech if you haven't already. Very interesting. It talks about connecting the dots, and I think that's something interesting to explore. Again, I said earlier, if you're a young graduate, getting into fintech may be challenging because not many law firms are focusing on this area. And even if they're focusing in the area, it's not like every day you get the opportunity to work in the fintech work. So if you really want to do fintech, and it's some of the most popular jurisdiction like Singapore, the UK, the US obviously tend to be the most popular one. Again, other things is obviously if you don't end up doing fintech specifically when you're pupillage or first year, it's not bad so long as you're in a corporate firm. Even in litigation, in the corporate field, you can always transition slowly. It's not easy, but still it's possible. The last read a lot. I still read a lot nowadays. I try my best to read at least 2 hours before I go to sleep. Obviously, doesn't work so well, but it's something that I still try to do. And obviously, try and read something that you like. It's very, very hard to focus if you don't like something, and that's also something else that I wanted to share earlier. You must find something that you enjoy, and that's something that's important for me, and I think it should be for you as well. Some books for you to read. Again, these are I want to say Bible, but these are like the usual books like every Silicon Valley entrepreneur would have in their bookshelf. Or obviously 0 to 1, Peter Thiel is the series of lecture that he gave. Was it MIT or can't remember, Stanford? The guy that was writing the notes, Peter Thiel said, okay, let us change it into book and become like a must-read book for every fintech, for every technology entrepreneur. Very interesting. Talks about startup and how the next Facebook will not be Facebook, but will be a completely different business. Talks about really changes the perspective that you have in terms of capitalism and how you should also approach your personal career development. I think very important book to read, to sit down and take time to read. The second one, obviously, I'm sure you have come across the phrase, the lean startup. Also, very interesting book to read if you're a young lawyer, simply because it really teaches us to approach a particular issue with a different perspective, in the sense that the purpose of the book by Eric Ries is actually to help founders to come up with this thing called MVP, which is the minimum viable product. So instead of spending all your money trying to build the best app, just build a landing page, and slowly from there you reiterate and get feedback, because the most important part is to shape or to get the product out and get the feedback from the market, and keep on reiterating until the business start generating money and so on. The third one, Lauren Lessig, is a Harvard lecturer, also a lawyer, activist. He wrote about how programming, coding will change the way how laws work. It's already happening now. You can see how blockchain through smart contracts be, even now in the last several weeks, having a lot of these debates among lawyers in Malaysia about how Sabah judges are already using, it's not AI in the AI sense of the word, where there's no algorithm or anything. It's more like just coming up with suggestion as to helping judges decide on sentencing. So the judge already made a decision as to what is the whether or not the accused person is guilty of a particular crime. And now what the software does essentially is to tell the judges, okay, these are the trends of the previous sentences that were meted out, so that this judge doesn't go and sentence somebody to 5 months and suddenly the other guy next day got 10 months, for example. Is to be able to have some form of consistency in terms of the trends when it comes to sentencing. Very interesting book, very interesting case study to go and read. The last one, also not trying to be a party pooper, but obviously I mentioned earlier, with all the technologies that we are experiencing now, people, they have no choice but to use cloud, to use video conferencing like this, to be on the internet. Just like people say, if you're not on social media, you don't exist. It also means that there are a lot more crimes that will be committed. You can, very scary book actually, if you read it, Future Crimes by Mark Goodman, the last one on the right side. The Mark Goodman guy used to be a police officer, and he worked in the cybercrime, the digital crime division. So in this book, it's quite interesting. He gave an example about a simple thing like drone, for example. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of use cases, how drones are being used to send live sensitive organs to very specific remote area, or being used to send drugs, and being used to send medicines in some part of remote African villages. But it also means that some terrorists can actually put a bomb on a drone and hit a building or something. For example, like 3D printer, for example, obviously people can actually print and implant titanium part of human body to replace a pacemaker, for example. But at the same time, it also means that somebody can just ship a 3D printer and make a weapon like a gun or something like that. So obviously, not trying to sound apocalyptic, but with all the technologies that we have, it also means that there'll be a new type of crimes that will also be um, prevalent, and that's something that's also worthwhile considering, so that you have a balanced overview of what's going to be in the terms of where the future outlook is going to look like. So thank you so much for listening. Always happy to be here and happy to connect. You can text me on, always email. There's no, I don't have a team, so all the emails comes to me. We do have interns. Happy to explore if you are looking for internship opportunity. Not that I run a large practice, so I also need to manage my expectation. But if you need any feedback or anything that I may not have covered, happy to have a separate chat. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, thank you, Izwan, for the insightful presentation. I think I can safely say that this session, right, I've learned more than a typical 2-hour uni lecture. But yeah, thank you so much, Izwan. So I think now we will proceed to the Q&A session. So I can see that there are 4 questions currently. So the first question reads, do you need to have technical knowledge of the financial technology to be a fintech lawyer, or is it something you learn and pick up as you practice? So is it better to already have technical knowledge?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's actually a very good question. Um, so technical knowledge obviously means having an understanding of the subject matter. So for example, dealing with blockchain, for example, um, obviously a lot of people are using this blockchain just like how people used to say IR 4.0 among the boomers, but nowadays people just use the word blockchain as if that they know what it means. But as a practitioner, you don't. I mean, obviously, it would be a good idea to really understand from a cryptographic level on a granular level as to how blockchain work. But you don't really need to do it. You really need to go down to that level of granularity. But it is a good idea to have that technical knowledge because imagine working with a fintech entrepreneur. Most of the time, you'll be speaking with a co-founder, which happens to be a technical founder. So there are two types of founders, right? One is the one that is guided, the one is cerebral, and the other one is guided by in Silicon Valley they call a CEO that is guided by light or guided by fire. So the guided by fire is actually more easier to share with you. You know Travis Kalanick, the Uber founder. He's more very passionate, very gung ho, and you can all see the fiasco that happened and led to his resignation. But in Malaysia, we have a lot more founders that are led by light, that very cerebral. You see a lot of founders, Joel Neo, Chen Chao from Faith, K-Fit, very smart people like Anthony Tan, very smart people, but they may not have the technical knowledge, meaning to say that he may have the vision as to what Grab should be, but he may need to hire someone that is technically competent. So to answer your question, um, even CEOs do not have the technical knowledge in a lot of the things that they are doing, which is why it's quite a situation that we have here in Malaysia where a lot of founders have got the idea like Fashion Ballet brand by VU. So she's very passionate what she's doing in terms of e-commerce, but she may not have the technical expertise to come up with an e-commerce platform, for example. So to come up with a question, yes, you can learn and pick it up as you practice, but obviously, if you have already been reading about it, cryptocurrency, now there are a lot of discussion about stable coin. Um, some countries are already looking at adopting digital currency. China is looking into it as a central bank, central bank currency, for example. So obviously, you may not need to know it in detail because, but again, it's not so difficult to pick it up. I mean, you can go and download a copy of Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. You can go and download a copy of Ethereum white paper by Vitalik Buterin. It's all there, and you can always go it up. I'm not saying that to make you less of a fraud or anything just because you go and read it, because everything is all there. I think a lot of the time it may not be something easy for us to appreciate simply because the fact that, I mean, who the hell learned this in law school, right? I mean, nobody taught us about all these things. Something that we're only figuring out now, and unfortunately, a lot of law schools are also trying to figure things out. And obviously, they know that these are all things happening. But I work in, I'm helping my previous law school, and I can tell you the whole nightmare of bureaucracy, just trying to get a simple speed networking sorted out. I know it's a very long answer to a simple question. The answer to your question is no, you do not need a technical knowledge to become a fintech lawyer. But what you actually need is obviously the interest. A lot of the time, they want to do fintech, they want to advise fintech startup, but they don't want to learn about the business. And obviously, any client that you're advising, especially if you're a property developer, obviously you need to know how property development process starts, right? I mean, in terms of land acquisition, getting the building approval, getting the local council building plan, and so on. Same goes to the fintech business as well. It's about having that understanding and being able to articulate and being able to pinpoint legal issues and compliant matters that needs to be addressed. And that's, I think, the important part. So please don't feel discouraged. There's so many things out there that's happening. I still haven't really figured out NFT, for example. I need to sit down and make time to read it up about non-fungible token. Very interesting development there in terms of the potential use cases on blockchain. So there's another question here. I don't know whether it's the same person. Is it better to gain some experience in more established older commercial practice like banking law before becoming a fintech lawyer? Would I have a better understanding? It's a very difficult question to ask, but chances are when you're starting out as a young lawyer, it may be difficult to join an existing fintech practice depending on the timing. So you also need to, I mean, we have a long wish list, right, in terms of what we want to achieve in life. But at the same time, we also need to accept the realities of life vicissitudes of what the situation is at the moment. So my personal response to this is that so long as you're within the realm of a commercial practice, company law, corporate law, banking law, these are the areas that obviously will be very useful when it comes to transitioning into fintech. Because obviously, how would you be able to advise on fintech business if you're not aware how a traditional bank would work, for example? So obviously, if you work with bank before, dealing with the bank is one of the most difficult client because they have like a long list of compliance requirement that they need to manage, and this is why it's so hard for fintech startup to get anything done with the bank. I mean, I know banks nowadays, they've got this innovation department, corporate innovation, all this thing, but obviously some of them are mere PR, but some of them are actually trying to do something interesting. Like Standard Chartered has Standard Chartered Ventures, where they do in-house innovation, their own mini corporate venture going on. So that's some interesting development over there. So to answer your question, it'll be obviously doesn't change the fact that you still need to know the fundamentals of corporate law, company law, because obviously you're dealing with fintech, being able to advise what are the limitation of securities laws when it comes to ICO, for example, the initial coin offering. Obviously, we have the guidelines on digital assets now, digital initial coin offering. The Securities Commission does have a framework to regulate, but at the same time, if somebody that is doing it for the first time, obviously it will be a very huge challenge to be able to navigate if you don't have an additional, if you don't have an existing understanding. So to answer your question, yeah, obviously you should spend the first few years. I mean, obviously I use the word first few years very loosely here. In a legal practice, we're looking at least 3 to 5 years just to build the foundation. But again, depends. I mean, if you join a large law firm like Izwan Partners, around the guys that probably, if you go back to 3 a.m. every day, and I suppose you may be end up doing a lot more than obviously your PQE, or I mean, you know, right? I mean, if somebody, you can sit down and speak to a lawyer that has 5-year PQE, or with two different lawyers with 5-year experience, you can get two different outcome in terms of the amount of experience that they may have done over the years. I mean, if you join a law firm and you do the same thing over and over again for 1 year, for 5 years, it's just like 1 year experience multiplied by 5. So you want to join a law firm that deals with difficult stuff or deal with different things, so that every year you're learning new things. I think that's the important part. So yeah, it's very good experience to start in a corporate practice. Not saying that litigation is not good, but there are more opportunities to really get to meet people in the commercial law space. Carmen asked a question. Yes, good day to you too, Carmen. What do you think about Securities Commission ban? Yeah, I mean, just like you saw earlier in the news articles, it's not only the Securities Commission in Malaysia doing this, Hong Kong, in Thailand, both of the capital market regulators have told Binance to stop operating, simply because what I told you earlier, laws are territorial. So every country that we go to have different laws in place that governs when it comes to offering products for the general public, especially when it comes to capital market, for example. Capital market is actually one of the most regulated industries in the world. I mean, especially dealing with the United States, for example, raising money, for example, is actually very regulated. So I think what this commission is trying to do is that it's trying to say to the company that if you want to operate, if you want to offer your product or services to our people, which is Malaysia, you need to get the license. So obviously, whether or not the regulator is going to be able to enforce it, that's another thing. I mean, obviously, just because I'm in Malaysia, I can always access the software. I can always download the app using VPN, virtual private network, and all the different stuff to bypass the firewall. Obviously, you guys know this as well. But the fact that there is, as a regulator, they are also responsible to ensure that the general public are protected in the sense that people don't go buy something and something goes wrong. Who will be liable because they're not here in Malaysia? They don't have a legal presence yet. I think they are in the midst of applying the necessary license, but at the same time, obviously, if you don't have a license, you cannot operate yet. And I think it's one of the cases where they get too excited and they want to operate. And so I think Binance has got a in principle approval in Singapore. So I do not know. Maybe they wanted to do the Uber way. They just, the Mark Zuckerberg was famous of saying, move fast and break things, right? Just don't care about regulation. Just do it first and see what happens. But as you can see over the years, that philosophy is no longer applicable. More regulators are taking an active role to protect the general public, and especially right now when times are getting more difficult, people are getting scammed left, right, and front. People are taking out their hard-earned savings from the employees' provident fund and being told that why don't you put your money in this cryptocurrency? You can make 100%, you can make 500%, and obviously the regulator is trying to avoid that from happening. Not suggesting that Binance is involved in that, just that the regulator wants to have accountability. And right now, because there is no legal present, people involved here, unlike Luno, for example, Luno tokenized synergy are obviously licensed here in Malaysia. Out of the 30 applicants that have applied, only 3 of them were licensed or approved for license. So yeah, I mean, I don't think SC is going to tell them that they cannot get a license. If they want the license, obviously they need to go through it the normal way, just like how everybody has done it. I think they are going to do that. Am I saying Yu Chen Li? Is it correct? I think Yu Chen Li asked a question. Yeah, I mean, the legal landscape is not going to be more restrictive just because Binance has been banned. I think, like what I said earlier, if you look at other jurisdictions, even in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission is still grappling with issues surrounding Coinbase and the stablecoin. And I think, so I'm not suggesting that it's going to be more restrictive or progressive. I think it's a matter of perspective. As a regulator, they need to also be seen as protecting the general public. But again, it all boils down, I don't want to sound jurisprudential here, but it all boils down to whether or not if you are a libertarian, then obviously you will not like the regulator telling you what you can, what you cannot do with your money. It's obviously your own prerogative, but obviously there are laws in place that governs property ownership. At the same time, we need to protect the general public from I don't want to say, maybe you want to say it's social Darwinism. Some people deserve to get scammed because they're not smart people, but the regulators exist for a reason, and that's what they're trying to do, is to really to ensure that as a platform, there are certain safeguards in place to ensure that I think the more important thing, if you look at the examples that I gave earlier, the reason why cryptocurrency is becoming such a difficult, tricky topic to navigate simply because of the whole immutability, the anonymity surrounding it. I mean, if you look at cryptocurrency, I mean, if you really read Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin's white paper, he mentioned clearly that the purpose of the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is to ensure that there's no intermediary or trustless. There's no intermediary or central authority that governs the transaction, which is exactly the opposite of what's happening right now. The regulator around the world are saying, hey, you want to send money using cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or Ethereum, you need to tell me what you're doing. Because obviously a lot of issues surrounding crimes, money laundering, people hiding their wealth through not paying taxes by converting their fiat cash into cryptocurrency. And obviously all countries around the world needs more money so that they can collect as tax, and they're trying to extract as much money they can from the taxpayer. And one of the things they're doing that is obviously through telling these cryptocurrency platforms to disclose who are their customers. So obviously I don't think that is going to be more restrictive. I mean, what is restrictive for you may not be restrictive for some people. I mean, a lot of people are not happy with the current guidelines on digital assets issued by the Securities Commission simply because of the long list of compliant checklists that needs to be complied. So we do have a guideline issued by the regulator in Malaysia that allows for companies to do ICO, initial coin offering, but the whole application process, getting the approval from the regulator just makes the whole thing unexciting. I mean, there's also a long list of disclosure requirement, what need to disclose in the white paper. So it's not like the cowboy heydays like what was happening several years ago, where people just throwing money and a lot of people lost money, by the way. If you read the pensioners, these people just, I mean, you can say it's irrational, exuberant, people just getting excited, and a lot of people lost money, and what SC is trying to do is to provide that kind of a safeguards. I mean, I think even as a regulator, they're having a tough challenge because at the same time, like what you mentioned, Chen, that they don't want to be handcuffing or telling people you can't do this, you can't do that. But at the same time, the regulator also wants to be seen as progressive and wanting to facilitate. So that's why we need more people like you to be in the regulator department to really think about ideas on how we can make it more facilitative instead of restrictive. And that is something that I think will be a lot more discussion, and obviously these are all interesting stuff. These are all evolving as we speak, and which is why I mentioned earlier, you're dealing with a shifting regulatory landscape where it's not something that is cast in stone. What will be the case right now may not be the same in the next 3 months or 6 months, because there's so many smart people out there trying to figure out things and so on. And if somebody is not happy with Malaysia, he can just take the next flight and move to other places and do it over there. There's really nothing stopping you from taking your business elsewhere, simply because of the global nature of the cryptocurrency itself. Okay, I hope that helps. Next question is, do you need to be called to the bar to go into fintech? The answer is yes, if you want to be a practicing lawyer. No, if you don't want to be a lawyer. I mean, obviously, you want to go and work in Luno now, Binance. There was a post, somebody on Twitter that saying that Binance is looking for people in Malaysia. So I think they are in the midst of getting the license from the regulator, I suspect. And obviously, compliance officer, legal person is always something that is always important person to be in the in any fintech company for that matter. So another question, you wanted to know about BNM and SC cryptocurrency is not legal tender. So the entity that came out with the order was actually the central bank. So central bank came out with a statement to say that cryptocurrency is not a legal tender, and then consequently the Securities Commission came up with Gazette, which is an order to say that cryptocurrency is securities. or digital currency, sorry, digital currencies security. So what this effectively means is that cryptocurrency now becomes the purview of the Securities Commission. So anything that's got to do with cryptocurrency, digital asset, Bitcoin, BTC, ETH, so the ones that have been approved by the SEs are all under the SE's purview. In terms of the effect, I mean, the effect here is that we have more regulatory clarity now. So at least we know now if we need to deal with cryptocurrency, most the people that we need to speak is actually the Securities Commission. And it makes it very clear now if you want to become a cryptocurrency exchange or you want to become a crypto wallet or holding the whole hot wallet or cold wallet, you've got the guideline that needs to be fulfilled and satisfied. And the guys that you're talking to at the SC, they're very smart people. I mean, they spend their time every day just reading the news about what's happening around the world. And obviously, the guys that you're talking to, if you're bringing a client to meet the regulator, you must know exactly what you're talking about. And obviously, one of the challenges that we come across is that if you are a fintech company operating in overseas, you want to come to Malaysia, and obviously the regulator wants to know if we issue you the license tomorrow, what are you going to do with the license, and being able to articulate the business plan, how you're going to roll out, how you're going to ensure that the customer or the clients that are onboarded on the platform have full understanding or disclosure. For example, if you look at one of the any equity crowdfunding platform, any peer-to-peer platform right now, Ataplas, Pitchen, funded by me, funding societies, Capital Bay, you see a long list of disclaimer and warning statement because the regulator puts it very clearly that you need to make sure that the investors know that if they invest in the startup, they can lose 100% of their money. It's not like you're buying shares in the stock market where you can just sell it kind of thing. It's very illiquid kind of investment. So yeah, there's no effect per se. It means that, I mean, that's the thing when you meet the regulator, right? It's either the regulator will say, yes, you can do it, or the other, they will say you can't do it. So at least there's some finality there. I think that's important. The another question is, which area should startup in Malaysia look at to avoid market saturation? It's very hard. I don't know how to answer this question actually. I mean, there's so many problems out there in the world, especially in Malaysia. We have so many problems that obviously you can't expect just the government to help. I work a lot with social enterprises, and I'm always so inspired and encouraged by the kind of stuff that they're doing, trying to help with the environment, with the issues that we have facing, poverty, alleviation, and so on. To answer your question, when it comes to market saturation, really go and read this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. It talks about exactly what you're asking for. You guys read the news last week about Razer, right? Razer Pay and Razer wallet shutting down. So 31st August is the last day of operation. So even a unicorn listed company in Singapore cannot compete against GrabPay, Touch and Go Pay, and all the guys. So obviously it's not a cheap game to be involved if you don't have the money to throw around. Just like how Shopee Pay, I don't know whether you guys realize that giving out 3 ringgit, 5 ringgit coin just because when you spend kind of thing. So it's a very expensive game to be involved in the sense that you're trying to capture the customers, and what makes startup or fintech so scary or exciting depending on your perspective is that I think it's more like a zero-sum game in the sense that currently if you want to buy pisang goreng, banana fritters, you can either go to the one in TTDI, but the lady that sells the banana fritters in TTDI will have no issue if somebody is selling the same thing in Damansara Perdana, for example, Sungai Buloh, which is completely different from where she's selling her banana fritters. But if you're running an e-commerce platform, like Shopee or Lazada or Presto Mall, Go Shop. If you don't have a niche, you probably have to shut down your e-commerce platform because it's very expensive business. If so, I don't know whether you guys understand what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that it's a very competitive landscape in the sense that I mean, there are two ways for you to make money, right? It's either you go niche where you focus on a premium product, or you go retail in terms of massive scale. And that's what fintech companies are also trying to do. So if you're a fintech startup, how are you helping the customers? If you're helping, if you're an insurance technology, insurtech, for example, how are you helping insurance company? You can either help them in two ways. One is you're helping Maybank Etika or Alliance or all the other large insurance. You're helping them make more money by selling more insurance product. Or second is you help them save money by reducing the number of claims. So to answer your question is, you can't avoid market situation. If people you can see now in e-commerce platform, now people are selling so many things online, but there's some people that are making exceptional amount of profit simply because they found a particular niche, or they're just so effective in marketing their product or their value position. I think that is important, and do read up that book, Lean Startup Method. Talks exactly about what you're saying. It's about this thing called finding a product market fit. So if you have not figured out what is your product market fit, that's where it's going to be the challenge. And the idea of that book is to build the version 1.0, which is a minimum viable product. Once you got the MVP, bring it to the market, get the public to give their feedback, keep on reiterating until you found this thing called product market fit, so that you can scale. So again, we are deviating from our core discussion, but it is going to be challenging, but at the same time, it can be very financially rewarding if you have the drive for it. It's not for everybody, but it's been a very exciting journey for me so far. I hope that answers your question. Does your firm offer privilege? We do. Just drop me an email. Happy to have a separate chat. Come and ask another question. E-contract and conveyancing law. Come, you need to look at the, I don't know where should I be telling you what to do. I'm sure you know this already. The challenge with bringing electronic signature in conveyancing law practice, there's some things that you still cannot automate. So you're dealing with the whole aspect of real estate transaction, simple thing like sale and purchase of a house or a building or a land. Some parts of it you can automate or you can digitize in terms of electronic signature, but there's certain things that you can't automate. Things like doing the rudimentary land search. You still need to get a dispatch to go and check whether the land title is there or not, whether the land is caveated, there's any caveat or encumbrance or restriction of interest. And ultimately, obviously, going through the bank loan application, if it's going to be a financing approach or going to be a cash transaction. And finally, the more important part is the land presentation itself, because the conveyable instrument to purchase or sell a land is the Form 14A, which is the land title. So that land title needs to be presented to the land office, and the land office, every state, every town council have their own land office, and they deal things differently. Especially if you don't have a land title, you can use deed of assignment. My personal opinion to this is that there are a lot of component and areas that needs to come together for it to work. And some people have tried to do it. They wanted to do a fractional ownership of property and all that thing, but people just get overwhelmed because they're trying to do everything from a whole end-to-end value chain. So unless you're looking at very specific pain point you want to address, there could be an angle there. I know most banks now have their own internal management software that allows for law firms to update on the current clients that they are dealing with in terms of the borrower. So I do not know, maybe looking at how to help to make it more efficient in terms of client management. Because in terms of electronic signatures, we all use e-signatures now, except with exception to certain things that are not allowed under the Electronic Commerce Act, like wills, wills, power of attorney, and all the court documents like affidavit and so on. So obviously, land transfer title, the Form 14A will fall within one of those ambits of stuff that you can't use e-signature. So I don't know whether I answered Carmen's question, but happy to have a separate chat about what you're trying to do. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. I know I should have stopped at 4, but got a bit too excited.
No worries, no worries. All right, so that brings our session for today to an end. So on behalf of KPUM, I would like to thank Izwan once again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us and for sharing your experiences in today's session. So if you're watching this on behalf of KPUM, I thank you all for joining us today and supporting our work. So stay tuned to our social media platforms for more information about our other upcoming webinars. So we also appreciate it if you could fill out a short 3-minute feedback form after this webinar ends to help us serve you better. So once again, thank you all for watching, and we hope to host you again soon. Thank you and bye-bye.